Resilient minds, active voices, democratic futures. Welcome to YouthWell, the podcast where young people and experts come together to inspire change.
Welcome to the YouthWell podcast. Today's episode is on well-being, feel better, live more, and I'm your host, Ritti Samko. We have an exciting lineup of guests for you, ranging from a circus performer and somatic coach to two social anthropologists, one researching the hikikomori phenomenon and the other researching mental health diagnoses in higher education. Welcome Emma Poole, Jeremy Pilia, and Stefan X. I'd like to begin with Emma, who is a Liverpool-based aerial rope artist and somatic coach who specializes in helping movement artists reclaim their self-worth and create more meaningful lives. She uses her psychology, somatic, and movement background, along with sharing her personal journey, to create workshops and programs around confidence, body image, and self-expression to empower artists to find their voice. Welcome, Emma. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background as a circus performer?
Hi. Yeah, so I started circus 12 years ago now. I did my first aerial circus class and I just went along with a friend because she was like, I'm going to a class, and I went along and I didn't know what it was. And I showed up and we just became obsessed instantly with the aerial world and how good it made me feel. I had a background in dance and I struggled a lot with dance and not feeling good enough. And then aerial was something that was new and exciting. And I was just obsessed. So I was then able to train. I was lucky enough to work and perform across the world, like with companies such as Fidget Feet and All or Nothing. And I just had a really exciting aerial circus career.
Thank you. It's such an interesting background and such an interesting contribution that you're bringing today. So you have a program called Body of Worth. Can you tell us a bit about it, please?
Yeah, so Body of Worth is my 8-week online program for movement artists. It's based around helping people reclaim their worth, feel really good about themselves, and really create meaningful lives and really find that confidence and expression and all of that. It's all about like really empowering artists to feel good about themselves and their work.
Wow, thank you. And how did you come up with that idea?
So this came from a chunk of research that I did, psychological research I did around self-esteem and body image in the aerial industry. I did it to see what was going on and how people were feeling, and the response I got was overwhelming. I got like hundreds of aerialists contact me and explain how they're really struggling with self-worth and body image. And so I wanted to create something, and this has been a long process that I've been building it together across the years, to create something that was a space that people could share their experiences, but also have tools to help them find ways to really reclaim their worth and really feel connected to their self-worth again. It's been a process. It started as a workshop and now it's an 8-week program. And that's where it was birthed from that piece of research that I did. Yeah.
That's incredible. So a small idea just became this entire program that you've created and curated for people kind of responding to their needs. So what can you tell us a little bit about what have you learned from the project so far?
It's been fascinating. It's been a whole journey from how it started as workshops, but a lot of what I found is the community aspect of the project that I'm doing is maybe the most beneficial part, like people able to share how they're feeling, what they're experiencing with other people, and other people to really hold them in that and support them in that and express that, oh, I feel that too, like I can connect to that, and just really feel less alone. I think that has been really beneficial. And for movement artists as well, I love working with somatics because it's so connected to the body, and instead of the body being this tool, this paintbrush that they create with, it can also be a tool that they can look after, or something that they can look after and tend to their nervous system, and it not just being something that they have to create art with. It's something that they can look after and use that to feel better about themselves as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I've learned from this whole process.
I know I participated in one of your workshops a couple of years ago, and I remember, and I encouraged other people to join it as well. And I remember one of my friends coming out in tears and saying, I needed that so much. I needed to talk so much about how I see myself when I'm in the air and how I feel like I fit in or I don't fit in. And, giving people that space to talk about something that they never get to talk about in the discipline. We work so much with our bodies, but we don't get to reflect and talk about it. So it's really a beautiful project. I wanted to ask you, do you enjoy running it? And what are some of the challenges you've encountered either while you were creating the project or in running the project over the years?
Yeah, I absolutely love it's my favorite part of my job is this project. I love this project so much. So I do love running it. The only thing one of the main things I struggle with the most is the spreading the word and the marketing aspect, I guess, of like how to spread the word about what the project is. I think a lot of people, even with the title I'm playing at the moment, we're changing the title, not body of worth, but the tagline underneath for movement artist. There's a lot of people that still can't even claim this title of being an artist, and they're like, oh, that's not for me because I'm not quite there yet. Whereas sometimes those are the people who might need this kind of thing the most to really see their own value. So I guess, yeah, that is the most challenging aspect at the moment that I'm trying to figure out.
And can you tell us a little bit about the feedback that you've gotten from people who've participated in Body of Worth over the years? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what it looks like when you're participating, when you enter the workshop. What are the kinds of things that you do and how people respond to the individual aspects of Body of Worth?
So the feedback has been, really positive, like overwhelmingly positive. I didn't realize how big this was going to go. I didn't realize how much this was needed. So it has been, such a lovely thing to be a part of and to be able to share. Like you were saying before, a lot of people expressed that they just needed that outlet. They needed that space to share and just finding time to reconnect to their own bodies and their nervous system, and saying things like, I didn't know that I was abandoning myself in that way, or I didn't know that I wasn't looking after myself. The main feedback that comes, like I said before, was the community. Like, I really needed this community. And along with the program, I create a group chat, and that group chat just stays as it is. So like I've got group chats from 2 years ago that people are still like, oh, I did this thing, or everyone has their own challenges. And if one of their challenges is, oh, I needed to do this for myself or say no to this thing, and then they share it in the group chat. So it's so nice that they keep that community and keep that going, that support going. So
that's gorgeous. So the project just has grown its own kind of legs and continues even after you, so to speak, are done with it. It's got this ongoing sustainability. That's beautiful. Congratulations that's the case. So as you know, one of the remits of the YouthWell project is, destigmatizing mental health and talking about mental health. So in your own work, when you speak with people about mental health, what is their relationship to the topic of mental health in the aerial world?
It's usually people are pretty open to share what they're struggling with. People are usually really open to sharing that, and which is really helpful for the other people in the group, and then they're able to connect and share what their experiences are. So it's in general, they seem to have a pretty good relationship with their mental health.
That's great. Okay. And so then the gold nugget, other flip side of the question that has to do with the YouthWell project is, what about the impact of social media in your work? Maybe prior to Body of Worth, and then maybe do you see a difference with after people have gone through the Body of Worth program with you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because a lot of what people express is how social media impacts how they see themselves, so the comparison and how they compare themselves to other people and other artists. And then the Body of Work program is a lot about reducing comparison and really finding your own uniqueness and what you've got to share with the world and seeing the value in that. So afterwards, people have expressed that they're less attached to social media in the way of I must look like this person or I must try and become more like this person, and more about seeing their own and creating their own world within social media that feels good for them and setting boundaries around social media. A lot of it is around boundaries and how we can shift our own Instagram account, for example, to feel better and more positive for you personally, and taking out the personalization of like, oh, I must mute this person's post. It's nothing to do with them, but it's about how I respond to those posts and protecting me.
Yeah, because that's I know that we all do that, don't we? We mute posts and we say, okay, that's not going to be good for my mental health to see it. But then, your work is going from the inside out, right? You're looking at how people can change their own ideas of what they expect from themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Emma. That's so wonderful. That's so interesting. Thank you. And congratulations on creating such an incredible program for people, and also for finding such a niche space as well, because I'm sure that the aerial and circus community didn't know how much they needed it until you came along and you showed them. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
We'll bring Emma back in the discussion round. But next up, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jeremy, who is a doctoral candidate in social anthropology at the University of Edinburgh. Jeremy's research interests lie in solitude and solitary behavior, and his PhD research is on the phenomenon of hikikomori, or social withdrawal, to better understand the lived experience of withdrawal through an anthropological viewpoint. So that is how hikikomori inhabits a particular world outside society and inside their home. Thank you for joining us, Jeremy. Welcome to the podcast. So for the audience members who've never heard of hikikomori, can you please tell us what this is and why is it becoming so popular at the moment?
Well, I tend to forget that people haven't heard about it, actually, because it's become a normal word for me. So to best describe hikikomori, I think it's Tamaki Saito, a Japanese psychiatrist, who was the first to define this phenomenon of and the individual's withdrawing from society in a book in 1998. And so hikikomori refers to a state in which individuals withdraw from society in their own home for a long period of time, usually over 6 months, and whose only social contacts are with their own family, usually their parents. They're sort of a carer, actually, for them. So although the definition has evolved the past few years, Saito said that hikikomori was a prolongation of adolescence, in a sense that it was young people, early teens and early 20s that withdrew for a long period, and then they became like a lifelong adolescent. Hikikomori is a very heterogeneous group, so it's difficult to pinpoint who they really are and what it actually is. And you asked me why is it so popular? So the simple answer to me would be that we spend more and more time at home. Nowadays, we can work from home, study from home, socialize directly and indirectly via social media, online forums. People learn languages from home, and you have access to endless entertainment, which can have a number effect as well, right? In the past few years, in many European countries, more and more young people tend to stay at home longer. I mean, as you know, in Italy is a very big phenomenon, but it's also in France and now in UK as well. In UK, it's more to do with people coming back to home. So it's kind of a boomerang effect. So they leave home, but life is so difficult or precarious that they come back to their family home. Due to financial pressure, lack of job opportunities, and lack of social safety nets, young people tend to come back and then sort of stay in their family home. For young people, there's a sense of loss of purpose because they have to stay at home. So whether you're cooped in your room or you work in a precarious job or 9-to-5 job, for them is more or less the same. So a period of withdrawal is also life's choice to retire and to reflect upon all those difficulties, I think.
It was so fascinating. And I have to admit, you really got me there when you said, oh, you can work from home, you can entertain from home. And I'm finding myself exactly in that situation right now going, oh, I'm so happy at home and I can just read. And you're speaking to me.
Yeah, I think it's just to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be a very big conversational topic as well, where a lot of people, I suppose, can reflect. What makes this research that you're doing so paradoxical and interesting, I think, is how do you research people who, by definition, want to be alone?
You just stole my line. Yeah, it's paradoxical. we might think as face value, you're like, okay, well, actually, if you want to be alone, you just don't connect, right? But actually, solitary and withdrawn individuals can be found on online forums. So I use Reddit as my main source of finding my participants, but there are also other forums online you can find. So they go there usually to vent about their life. There are good places to communicate, but also not wanting to socialize. It's sort of like it's their own rhythm. It's not direct messaging. It's not voice call. It's not face-to-face. So there's a sense of like having a control over the conversations really online. So usually they go there to share about what they go through, see other people go through the same thing usually, what their thoughts are, their understanding of the situation, their life, their despair, their hope also for the future.
So you try to catch them while they're showing themselves. Okay.
Yeah, that's why one of my participants said, it was like, so how? I was like, why did you answer to my post? He was like, well, I was just randomly going through this post through the subreddit of Hikikomori, and then you appeared, and so I was like, why not?
That's great. Why not? That's fantastic. That it's not proving so difficult then to catch the people.
Well, yes and no. So my post had few thousand views, but only 6 people answered.
Yeah.
The stream, right? There's 1,000 people see it, but only a fraction of them actually answer. Success rate are really small.
I think also that depends on how you qualify success, because it's also, you manage to catch a couple of people, and then it's very interesting to know why did those people respond as opposed to others. So while we were speaking about this topic, I was wondering, because historically and across cultures, we encounter hermits, we encounter religious people who enter voluntary isolation, and it feels like they're almost like a relic of the past, like a desirable, romanticized past. So I wanted to ask you, how do they differ from people who are embracing hikikomori? Are those, would you say, two fundamentally different phenomena?
The short answer would be yes, they're different. The longer answer would be like, well, this is why this research is sort of fascinating and interesting, is because, as you said, across history and cultures, we always had solitary individuals, right? In terms of hermits, religious asceticism, or even more recently, the romantics, right? The romantics were trying to stay away from the industrial modern city that was developing at that time, to go back to nature. By doing so, they were seeking some sort of like more authentic lifestyle, or that developed and reinforced the idea of the artistic figure as inherently solitary. But also, on the other hand, hikikomori come almost in complete opposition to those ideas, because according to psychiatrists and psychologists and clinical research, hikikomori do nothing, according to them, which is not quite true. And also, solitude is seen as a pathology. So all of a sudden, you pathologize a very natural thing to do, which is to become solitary and to seek solitude sometimes. But what's different with the hikikomori compared to, I'll say, the historical hermits or the religious asceticism is that they seclude themselves in their bedroom. And even though they might live alone, they live with their family. They don't live in nature or in hermitage or monastic cell. But there's a sort of a parallel here between the bedroom and the cell, a sort of like a self-inflicted imprisonment. So it could be a form of asceticism in a way, but I think I'm leaving the door open to interpretation and to my research as well to actually look into this.
You've kind of already answered it, but that leads to my next question, which is, so as an utterly simplified question, is hikikomori a bad thing, something to be discouraged, or does it come with some kinds of benefits, or is it a representation of modern society? What would you say?
So I would say that living in isolated or for prolonged periods of isolation is definitely, it can be a bad thing. There are major health issues that arise from it, right? Because sometimes, quite often actually, they reverse the day and night pattern, hikikomori, so they sleep during the day and they live at night to really avoid social contact to the maximum. So that can lead also to issues in terms of eyesight problems, weight loss problem or gain loss, cardiovascular problem, lungs issues, respiratory issues, or even there's one example in one French studies where one of them has been isolating for so long that standing up on his feet for too long actually hurt the sole of his feet.
Oh, wow.
So the bodily experience of it is extremely interesting and very underdeveloped and understudied as well. So it might be beneficial in the short term or even like longer term if it's done well. So it has to do with the representation of our society, because we live in a society that is even more connected and yet even more isolating,
Right.
there's a sense of never be enough for society standards, like beauty standards, being humorous, having hobbies, being smart, being flexible, being entrepreneurial. So there's a sense of not ever fitting and not being adequate. We assume that the best way to deal with it is actually to withdraw, is to refuse this all these society standards that is put upon us.
I think there will be a very interesting discussion, I think, between yourself and Emma afterwards in the discussion round, because you touched on a couple of things that she's working on. I know you've told us quite a lot already, but I want to give you the opportunity in case there's something else you want to share. What are some other key things that you've discovered in your research?
Hikikomori are and can be relatively active, and they do a lot of things. And so, for some example, one of them loves to read and learn about philosophy and draw maps. He draws maps on alternative history, for instance. Another one is a writer. He loves to write poems and novels. And he also volunteers, but he sees himself as hikikomori. Another one learns Mandarin. He was in Hong Kong for a few years and came back and got stuck at home, and now he's learning Chinese by himself. And just told me like he gathered a lot of materials from Chinese education system, where actually how to teach Chinese to young people. So he's learning Chinese as a young Chinese person.
That's perfect. That's so interesting because, of course, I think, looking at this with zero knowledge, people would say, people who are doing hikikomori are lazy, they're antisocial, but actually you're showing that there's a huge world, there's so much nuance, and there's so much that needs to be researched. You've mentioned so many fascinating things. So I'm going to pose the same question that I asked Emma. As you know, YouthWell, it's all about mental health and social media. So I'm wondering, in your own research, how do young people speak about mental health, and what is the impact of social media on your research?
That's also a very tricky question. So if you look at the Reddit of Hikikomori, they are really openly speaking about their mental health, like schizoid personality disorders, depression, anxiety, PTSD, borderline personality disorders, all of this. So it's a place where actually they talk about it very openly, and I think there's a sense of like solidarity. But also, from my experience with my participants, there's still a lot of apprehension towards professional practitioners, mental health practitioners, because sometimes they don't want to be diagnosed with anything. Some people don't, or they don't want to fall into a category.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was so interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion round. Congratulations on selecting such a fascinating research topic, and good luck on your fieldwork and the rest of your fieldwork. It's super interesting. So finally, we welcome Stefan. Stefan X is a medical anthropologist at the University of Edinburgh, where he co-founded the medical anthropology program. He has conducted ethnographic research in India, Nepal, Myanmar, and the UK on topics ranging from pharmaceutical markets to the social life of mental illness. So great to see you. So you recently participated in a workshop on youth mental health in Hong Kong. Can you tell us what was the focus and why was this important?
So this workshop was convened in Hong Kong, and it was a small seminar of scholars, both academics, but also therapists, a lot of early career researchers. We were all working on youth mental health across Asia and North America. And what made this so vital was that we moved very quickly to these really deep questions, like why has the rate of mental health diagnosis in higher education specifically also been rising so dramatically? We've all been seeing this over the years, that where there were not as many diagnoses of depression and anxiety disorder, for example, just 10 or 20 years ago. Now it's absolutely epidemic. Then finally, it was this question of what does this tell us about higher education itself? Like, where are we moving? And we found that there are many intersecting factors, we got papers on chronic suicidality, and of course a lot on social media as well, and a lot also on the changing questions of precarity and economic circumstances, for example. But the one thing that really emerged for me is what I call transactive dualism, which is a new concept to grasp that both higher education and mental health services are increasingly structured by a logic of transaction. Transactive dualism does, and this logic just carves up all mental health into discrete, measurable, and exchangeable units, such as therapy sessions, diagnosis, attendance logs, mental health app usages. So everything is being carved up into measurable units, and success is measured by throughput, and everything is squeezed into these transactional quantifiable logics. And that, to my mind, is really the core problem also. That's precisely that we're thinking about mental health nowadays in terms of services that meet a certain kind of demand that is coming from people. And then these services have to be supplied, and that the students also have a right to be supplied with these services that they're demanding. And so that everything around mental health on campuses is couched in these transactional logics.
That is so interesting. And yeah, I think you've hit so many nails on the head. So thank you so much for bringing this really fascinating insight to the discussion today.
And again, like what emerged for me as really interesting is that there is this very well-established language also of all of these mental health problems. But even when we say youth mental health, the entire language is actually about the diseases, the disorders, the illnesses, right? So we have a full vocabulary of anxiety, of depression, of hikikomori, of social anxiety, you name it. So everything that's supposed to be about youth mental health is actually really about youth pathology all the time, in that we don't even have a language to talk about health, right? How did we even end up in a situation where there isn't even any language anymore to talk about mental health, really in a positive kind of way, about mental health as flourishing, as feeling embedded in something much wider, But I think it's really important also to first grasp that why are we only talking about pathology, basically, and can we not also have a positive language around mental health that is truly about mental health and not just the opposite of illness or the absence of symptoms there?
Absolutely. So I'd like to go back to what you were saying about this transactional aspect of mental health. So over the past years, we've seen a change in how mental health services are offered, and counseling is becoming more crisis intervention. Can you tell us a bit about that and what you think are the consequences of this kind of change?
This came specifically from my colleagues at the workshop who have been either studying this or have been delivering kind of counseling also on campuses over the years. So the counseling services on campus have really, again, been transformed by this transactive dualist logic into basically psychiatric emergency rooms. Everything is focused around what kind of symptoms do they come in with? How can we then discharge them as quickly as possible? What kind of medications are best in place? And yeah, the entire logic is transactional, really. And that was especially clear in the North American campuses, and especially in very expensive private fee universities, right? They are also institutionally liable nowadays and feel very much under threat also, that they really have to develop and deliver these kind of mental health services, that's just part of what, that teaching has turned into something that is demanded and that needs to be supplied by the university, and in the same way that the university has to support supply mental health services in this way, and that there are these demands and that these demands must be met by students. And if they're not being met, then the university is also making itself liable to all sorts of complaints, and the students aren't happy and all that.
So you've written about predictive analytics and surveillance, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that. And maybe you can explain first to all our listeners what you mean by predictive analytics and surveillance and what role they play in this new mental health landscape as you've been describing it.
Yeah, this is in many ways a very troubling development because the universities are now also retooling or rethinking mental health, not as something that should be fostered and encouraged, but it actually becomes part of the audit culture. It becomes part of the surveillance of the students also. And the universities are turning to mental health with predictive analytics. So who are the students at risk? Can you track them early on? Universities basically collapse mental health care into surveillance forms, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about this also as an individual academic. This is a machinery that you have to completely comply with. So what this does, it enforces a vision of mental health as something that's trackable, reportable, again, completely metrics friendly. Yeah, but the problem, of course, is that mental health doesn't really follow the transactive logic. It cannot actually be reduced to it. It's fuzzy, it's nonlinear, it's deeply embodied, it thrives on relationality and unpredictability in so many ways also. And it's this whole culture of metrification, really, that is, to my mind, very much part of the problem. It thinks it's part of the solution, but actually that it's precisely what makes it part of the problem. And one of the main reasons why we're actually seeing this enormous rise of demands on mental health services in universities.
That leads me straight to one of my last questions. As you know, the Youthful Project is all about destigmatizing mental health. So I'd like to ask you, do you think this destigmatization of mental health is happening, and what risks are coming with it?
I mean, destigmatization has definitely been massive, like in ways that you would have maybe felt a little bit self-conscious or maybe even ashamed 10 years ago to say that you have mental health issues, that you are feeling anxious or something. I think nowadays it's become almost entirely. So the students aren't just suffering, they're questioning also how they're suffering and if it's real enough. Do I actually cross the thresholds for asking for care? And destigmatization, to my mind, and actually the whole discourse around stigmatization, destigmatization, because it's usually seen as an all-out good thing that something is destigmatized and let's talk about it, let's open up. But it is still important also to be mindful of this culture that then, and that's where you're rightly saying that Foucault really is back, where this is so much encouraged all the time, that do talk, or actually you must talk. Like, this is not even something that you're allowed to hold back anymore, but you actually have to talk about it, really.
Do you find that social media plays a role in youth mental health and in the work that you've been researching?
Yes, it has become a commonplace to say that, of course, all of these problems in youth mental health are all down to social media because it creates eating disorders and anxiety and bullying and all of this. Everything is being molded in this transactionalist way. And then it suddenly became clear to me also that, of course, the social media use is another extremely reinforcing loop in this over overemphasis on transactions, right? Because social media almost work entirely on this framework of extreme transactionalism, that I post something and then I get this many likes, I get this much engagement, I get this many views on it. So social medias are transactive dualism on steroids, and they actually reinforce this transactional logic that suffuses higher education and suffuses the mental health services on campuses.
Thank you so much for sharing this really incredible research and for breaking down and tearing apart the mental health discussion into such fascinating nuances and so many rabbit holes. So bringing everybody back into a brief discussion round and kind of opening the floor to whoever would like to lead. My question for you is, do you see overlaps between your own work and the work of the other presenters?
Yeah, if I may just make a start. So I think that there's definitely a lot of overlap and resonances with Jeremy's work. The standard model identifies this as pure pathology. There's absolutely nothing good about social withdrawal. And one of the things that Jeremy finds also is that, of course, there is a lot of positives also in this. And it's a certain kind of way of being in the world, being with others, that is not all out pathological. The language only allows us to talk about pathology when actually there is a lot of healthy, good things in there, but we can't really express it. And I see the same really in Emma's work. I think is incredibly important, because that's something that again runs through what I think is problematic about how mental health services have been thought about, is that most of these things actually are mental health problems, when actually maybe you just need to just feel your body again and reconnect with in a somatic kind of way that isn't even linguistic, that isn't even in any kind of reflexive.
Be in the body, right? So exactly. It feels like Emma's work is the literal response to, we don't have positive language for mental health. But Emma, I wonder, do you have any thoughts on this about, how the positivity, the positive language maybe that we're missing around mental health? Do you feel that's a correct way of describing it? And how would you reflect on this in your own work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I was saying before about people being so open to share their mental health issues, they're all very knowledgeable and able to explain all the things that they struggle with. Whereas my work brings in, questions like, what makes you feel most alive? What excites you? Like, what makes you feel grounded in your body? Like, what do you find pleasurable? What feels good in your body, rather than having just this constant conversation about all the ways they are lacking. And I think it can be very limiting, the labels and diagnoses that they have on themselves, like, I can't do this because I have this. And I guess that connects to the worth as well. If people don't feel worthy, and then they have this long list that validates the idea that they're not worthy and there's something wrong, with they're broken, and they've got this thing that means that they're not quite complete. It's like that can have such a block in so many areas. So I guess the work I'm doing is trying to shift that. Yeah, you might have these diagnoses, but that doesn't take away from your worth and how you can show up in the world.
I would love to hear if you felt any overlaps between each other's work. So between Jeremy's hikikomori work and Emma's body of worth work.
To me, it sounds like it's the bodily experience of being hikikomori, right? Being enclosed in the space, not moving or barely moving for not just days, as months, years sometimes. And this difficulty of moving also, I think, has an impact on their mental health, definitely, on how they see themselves, how they describe themselves. Usually they describe their body as rotting. It's really difficult language around, I'm staying home, I'm rotting, or so other people also talk about how moving during the hikikomori lifestyle helped them to actually carry on, this kind of lifestyle, like going on walks, carrying groceries, all these like everyday life things, or even like doing some sort of stretching. And easy things you can do in a very enclosed space, but keep yourself sort of feeling yourself in a way. Does that make sense?
I think one thing that I find so visceral and impactful are the words that were just used. Jeremy used the word rotting. I know Emma spoke about brokenness. Stefan also spoke about, surveillance, and these, it feels like it is indeed like such harsh, terrifying language. And I really enjoy that this conversation is going towards that push of how can we speak about it, not as a pathology, but in a positive sense.
The entire field also of medical anthropology is very deeply invested in this idea that health is really unspeakable, and only pathology really comes to language. So a state of health is a state where you don't have language for. Of course, how not just psychiatry, but biomedicine more generally, and all of these psychiatric and mental health services, because they all cut out key forms of human expression, such as dance, poetry, storytelling. All of this was precisely cut out, and it's this cutting out of these far more artistic forms of expression and feeling that precisely is the impoverishment, where then if you can't talk poetically, for example, about health anymore, and if you can't do dance work and performance work, if you cut all that out as illegitimate forms of expression also, that's precisely when you then end up with, the only allowable, permissible language for all of this is pathology, and that only biomedical language is then allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, let's find these positive ways of speaking about mental health that, and maybe there are no words. And this is exactly where Emma comes in, in like this, it's just, it's such a unique experience dependent on everybody's own experiences of their body and of their worlds. But it's exactly like these, your research, the research of the three of you is speaking so well to each other.
I was just going to say that it's just kind of clicked with what Stefan was just saying about, I think that's why I find it so hard to advertise, like to promote what I'm doing, because it's like self-worth, what's that? Like, what does that do? Like, what does that feel like? And I find it really hard to communicate what that is. And so I've been trying to find loads of different ways to see how it will enhance their lives and how it will make them feel. But a lot of the time is we're talking about all of the negative aspects of things.
Yeah. And how do we get away from that negative? How do you advertise your work? How do you speak about, hikikomori in a positive way, and mental health and the work, like body of worth? How do you speak about that, saying, let's not focus always on the negative that you're trying to get away from, the bad, the categorized bad that we're trying to get away from, but look at it all in a different light and as a bigger experience.
If you do a beautiful poetic performance, for example, to think of this in terms of value added in a quantifiable way in this transactional logic, this is not a transaction, and it's something else entirely. And we can't put it into words because all we have is this incredibly impoverished language of transactionality. And then the only way of saying something positive is, value added. But it's not like that.
And this is why art is important.
Absolutely.
This is why art is the last fighting stand against fascism and all the terrible problems in the world. So the final question, and I'd like to, go through each of you one after the other. Do you have any advice, any closing thoughts for our listeners and any participants of the YouthWell project?
I think the main thing is realize that your life and your being in the world and also your worth is not transactional, and resist the transactionalism.
Find your own rhythm, reclaim slowness, reclaim taking your time. There's nothing better than just solitude. Sometimes just be by yourself and then go back together. It's take your time, be with yourself and with others in a very meaningful way.
your worth, your self-worth is not something to be outsourced. It's not something transactional. It's more of a coming home to your body, to who you are, and embracing that and really finding your way and what feels good for you. It's not something that anything external is going to be able to fix. It's something that you come home to and that you're already completely worthy as you are.
Thank you. That's a wonderful way to close this episode. So I want to thank so much our wonderful guests, Emma Poole, Jeremy Pelia, and Stefan X, for joining us today and for telling us about their truly exciting work and for this very stimulating conversation. You can find links and contact details to their work and to their projects on our YouthWell website. If you enjoyed this episode of the YouthWell podcast, please share it widely with your friends. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much for your time. Have a beautiful day.